Nature of Society Part 1, Session 8R. Last week we put forward the structure of society that would apply to any society of any tradition. We said that the structure was as follows: master-teacher, civilization, laws and traditions, influence of judges and master artists, governments, which includes parliament, executive, judiciary, universities, churches, business and commercial centers, villages and towns, individual workers. This is the 7th-tier structure of society that has survived over the millennia. The individual worker, although at the bottom tier, participates at each level, and without his continuous participation, the society would collapse. Did we remember this structure during the week? Were there any observations garnered about its working during the last week? What can we share? This week we are going to talk about the environment and the impact that the communal dues spoken of in session 6 can have. The communal due was the revenue raised by tapping into the rental value of each site. To remind ourselves of what was said, the beneficial effects of the communal due can be summarized as follows. The communal due would discourage the holding from use of valuable idle land. It would encourage development and redevelopment of lands as and when it becomes available. Land would become available for use at its natural value and not at the monopoly prices prevailing. This would result in significant reduction in the startup costs required for new businesses and other activities engaged in by man, for example, settlement, construction, etc. The communal due would result in a more just and equitable tax regime. It would be applied in line with ability to pay, and its application would result in the restoration to the community in general of a value which the community as a whole has created. The introduction of the communal due would result in the increase in the establishment of new businesses and employment opportunities. There would be a widening of the tax base and a reduction of those objectionable taxes on labor and capital. The introduction of the communal due, in the end, would result in the human being less dependent on the state for his material existence than is the case at present. How would this communal due affect the environment? We believe that it would have a profoundly positive impact on the environment. We indicated in an earlier session that the communal due would discourage the holding from use of idle or unproductive lands. These lands may be held out of use by speculation or by the high cost of starting up of business. This communal due will make more compact and balanced communities. To make for more compact and balanced communities, the multitude of benefits can be listed as follows. 1. Communities will become more compact, and the trend of urban sprawl, which has been so evident over the last century, where populations have to live and commute from far distances to the centers, would end. These compact communities will lead to less expensive propositions for capital and recurrent expenditures with respect to roads, utilities, drainage, and other items, because less of these will now be required compared to the situation with sprawl. 3. Because less land development is now required with the communal due, the impact on this environment is now less, so that there is less likelihood of the phenomenon of flooding, which is a man-made phenomenon, will be significantly reduced. When large land masses are developed, the rainfall runoff is not properly disposed of, or if the drainage system is malfunctioning, will lead to severe flooding. 4. The whole issue of conservation is properly and adequately dealt with under the system of communal due. Planning of land use and environmental conservation is now more possible, where the authorities can plan the withholding and releasing of lands for development purposes while not compromising the need for development. Land use would be efficiently optimized and expenditures would also be more rational. 5. Another major benefit of the communal due system would be the virtual elimination of traffic jams and the need for commuting long distances. 6. Another major benefit of the communal due system would be the virtual elimination of traffic jams and the need for commuting long distances. Because communities are more compact and all the sites are producing, more goods and services needed in the community will be provided there. Employment opportunities will be available. Government services could be decentralized and made available right there in the community. 7. Under the communal due system, the ability to plan the economic landscape becomes much less complicated. Commercial centers, agricultural centers, industrial estates, recreational and residential areas could be planned and located in the most suitable areas of the physical landscape. In this setup, the environment could be more easily preserved and managed. Environmental pollution could be easier managed and mitigated. Here is a comment on the need to employ fiscal policies and measures that would reconcile the need for economic activity and growth with conservation of the environment. It is commonly assumed that there is a conflict between economics and ecology. What is implied is that our resources are being exploited on a purely economic basis and ecological considerations are ignored. However, this need not be so. In the first place, governments already have wide powers to dictate land use. And if land is exploited for its highest economic return and at the expense of the environment, it is hardly the fault of business interests, but rather the fault of the government. All this, however, is to accept that there is a necessary conflict, that the interests of businessmen cannot be reconciled with those of environmentalists, that the government must favor one side or the other, or reach an unsatisfactory compromise. There need not be conflict of interest if the right fiscal policies are adopted, and thus there need not be an unsatisfactory compromise, or for the government to come down fully on one side at the expense of the other. Fiscal policies are derived not merely as a means of raising revenue. Invariably, there is an economic objective being sought when fiscal policies are implemented, but whether or not such is the case, economic consequences do invariably follow, in addition to the simple extraction of tax. These economic consequences may either harness the self-interest of the person or corporation taxed, or be antagonistic to them. The key to reconciliation lies in harnessing the self-interest of both sides. Site value taxation is that fiscal policy and measure that will bring this reconciliation by optimizing economic activity as well as environmental conservation. This is a statement from V.H. Blundell. Let's take a short break now. In this second half, we will look at an excerpt on the perennial problem of flooding in the large country of the United States that wreaks so much destruction on communities in the Midwest and South, and what are possible solutions to this recurring disaster. Land use planning requires zoning, coercive restriction of land parcels to specified forms of use. Zoning always sets brakes on growth by distorting many well-appointed production schemes. If restraints on improvement cover sizable territories, fewer sites must be available for home building and factories. Under conditions of restricted land use, the cost of acquiring raw sites and installations must rise. This would hurt buyers and confer unearned benefits on sellers. This iniquitous distortion of the terms of trade would favor sellers over buyers. Sooner or later, this unbalanced bargaining power must work against efficiency in supplying consumer wants. If zoning against unwise land use is to dissipate more problems than it creates, zoning must be accompanied by rules of tenure comparable to those suggested for pollution control and conservation of resources. All sites subject to zoning should be tenured through the payment of rates, taxes, based on up-to-the-moment full market value. Unearned benefits from zoning would vanish. Balance would be struck between prospective users of land and yielders of title thereto. Sites would transfer at reasonable cost. Then the free market would show its powerful ability to please and render innocuous the putative limits to growth. Due to zoning, with such devices as cluster development, country-sited townhouses, and imaginative multiple dwelling design. Most planners seem to give greater consideration to matters of efficiency than to matters of equity. Few planners understand that equity such as tenure through site value has the inherent capacity to provide time-oriented efficiency. Good planning must include specified times of fulfillment of plans. The required times for plans to reach goals must be predictable. The shorter the time for fulfillment, the better. With shorter terms of fulfillment, there must be fewer unforeseen changes in circumstance and a greater probability of adherence to plan according to predicted costs and benefits. When the unforeseen does emerge, shorter terms make plan revision easier. But by lowering costs, tenure through site value must confer a wholesome degree of speed on plan fulfillment. In the problem of floodplain use, tenure through site value payments presents a pleasantly paradoxical aspect. Tenure through site value can enhance the prospective resolution of the problem in either of two ways that seem to be antagonistic ways of problem solving. Long before wilderness protection acquired its current chic, the English set up green belts, areas of naturalness close to developed areas. The many benefits from green belts should not make us forget holding good land from use means less for homes and industrial purposes. Can the highly desirable creation of green belts be made to serve the general welfare better than it does now by using suggested land value ecology proposal? A modification of technique is needed to apply tenure through site value payments in the greenbelt situation. People who live close to the greenbelts get long-term benefits appreciably greater than those who live further away. Those passing through get short-term benefits where the cost of measuring and collecting benefits is likely to be greater than possible revenues. The situation calls for the setting up of Greenbelt taxing districts. Cost of Greenbelt maintenance would then be apportioned in correspondence to benefits received. As in the case of zoned disuse of land, prices of land would stay reasonable because no bias would obtain favoring sellers over buyers. During the course of the week, have a look at what measures are being taken to ensure environmental conservation in your community, especially with the growing concern of the perils associated with climate change today. Come back with your observations. Before we end, I would like again to let you attendees know that unsustainable development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its course to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language in the first instance, and to all, eventually all over the world. To make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations, should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the email address nigelgittins@gmail.com. Thank you for your kind gesture.